What was it?
Hello and welcome to The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, a podcast about board games. We're just gonna start here, Andy. That's right. I don't want to have to like chop anything off the front of this. I just want to be able to start intro, get going with the show, and so that might be a little bit of a sloppy start. But yeah, our show tonight. I'm returning from a bit of a hiatus, kind of unexpected. Like planned but very quickly planned trip that I went on, and just a lot of things going on for me, a lot of upheaval in my life, and I just wanted to say big thank you to Andy, to Trent, and for you guys for picking up the torch, and a big congratulations to TC for getting hired and getting a new job. So it's great to have people that are willing to sort of, lift you up. And when you see the one set of footprints in the sand, sometimes, it's because you're the one being carried. So thanks to the good co-hosts I have here at the Good, the Bored, and the Ugly that have picked up when I did not have the ability to record. So anyway, my name is Joe Sallin. I'm the host of the Good, the Bored, and the Ugly. I'm joined tonight by Andy Dennison, who I've just told you is a wonderful person. Now let him prove you wrong by opening his mouth.
Oh, no, I'm a wonderful person. I'm just socially awkward.
So that's Andy. We are going to talk about board games. We review games. We talk about a topic in the hobby, and we hype games on the way out the door. Andy came up with a few options for me, and I really appreciate Andy letting me kind of pick to talk about favorite mechanisms in games and why. We're going to be doing kind of a, nothing too ground shattering here, but I mean, it's nice to.
After last week's, it'll be good to do a little light and fluffy anyway.
Yeah, difficult things. So yeah, after a difficult episode, this one, I think though, this is a fundamental episode, and I think it's nice to go back to these fundamental elements of the hobby periodically, because, I feel like just my whole view towards mechanisms have evolved since we've ever talked about any of them. Like I remember one time early when we were planning shows, I came up with like this big old list of topics for the show. And just to show you where I was at that point, it involved like 7 different mechanisms. I was like, oh, this will be a show. This will be a show. This will be a show. That's how I was filtering information at the time, was like entirely based on what mechanisms I like. So to be honest with you, Andy, this is like, the mechanisms are what it's kind of how I view the hobby. It's the lens that I view the hobby through. And so the fact that you suggested as an option, I was like, this is a great time for me to make a comeback, to make my return. And it's good to see here in the chat that we have David joining us. Hey, David, out there in sunnier Utah. I say sunnier because it is, I think, an hour. No, yes, it's 1 hour, because Arizona is 2 hours, but they're 1 hour ahead of us, which means they still have the sun, whereas we've pretty much got total sunset here in Iowa right now.
He's in that awkward mountain time zone, right?
Yeah, so the Arizona is like the awkwardest one, but from what I understand, they do not observe daylight savings time. This is where I was just there. That's why I went to Phoenix on my trip.
Oh God, I want on that bandwagon. I freaking hate daylight savings time.
Yes, exactly. Like Arizona is the weird one, quote unquote, by doing the thing that, from what I understand, is the intelligent decision. So, yeah.
No,
anyway.
Daylight savings time makes no sense. It just wrecks mental health. It's crap.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, we won't handle that difficult theme tonight.
Some people advocate the universal time.
Oh,
where
yeah.
Like there's no time zone. So if you say it's 2 p.m., it's literally 2 p.m. everywhere on Earth, and it's just when you wake up and go to bed.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, really light out there on the West Coast with John telling us it's 7 p.m. Yeah. I wonder how close you are to TC, which up in old Oregon. There, hey, TC's in our chat. Whoa, on crappy Wi-Fi. No, Wi-Fi. Good, I miss you too, TC.
Oh, they did have that at the last time I went camping with Will. They're like, Wi-Fi access. I'm like, isn't the point to go camping is to get away from this crap for a while?
Well, David in our chat is a pilot, and so Andy, what you just said, like that universal time is what you have to go off of when you are crossing so many time zones. So yeah. It's makes sense. What time is it right now by UTC? I wonder. Is it like based off Greenwich? I feel like it's just going to be maybe that, or is it based on that international date line that's like smack dab in the middle of nowhere in the Pacific Ocean?
You could go with the metric time that the French used, and the whole country nearly rebelled again against the government because of it. People were not okay with 100-minute hours and 10 hours in a day or something, and
Yeah.
it was not good.
Well, we have Oregon being represented, we have Washington being represented, we have Utah being represented, and I think that shows that our recording time is probably most convenient towards those west of us. Sorry to those of you on the East Coast that will be listening here in the morning for the inconvenient live recordings. But hey, oh boy, I'm already in that nastiness again, that nasty bitey thing. The important people are here, so we can go. Ooh, it's like my teacher thing to say whenever there's whenever there's a class that's half empty because of some sporting event or something, and some kid's like, "Do we have to do anything?" Well, the important people are here, so we're gonna have this lesson.
Yeah, I always like it when they come up when they've been gone. They're like, "Did we do anything yesterday?" And I'm always like, "No, we just sit here and stare at the walls for 45 minutes." Rephrase your question.
Mm-hmm. But you mentioned it though, there, Andy. You mentioned it in our chat. After you just said, how you get their attention by commanding their attention. The Murr on the East Coast usually is kind of our representative there of from Florida, and so we can span all the time zones if we get Murr on here, all the times in the continental U.S. So wouldn't that be cool?
Yes.
Yeah, and then I gotta call up my buddy in Halifax so that we can get that one Eastern Atlantic time zone, the one that's out in the ocean.
Or Alaska. What's Alaska?
Yeah, Alaska as well. Doesn't Alaska have 4 time zones just in itself too? Yeah. So anyway, Andy, let's maybe mosey on over to board games. Since that's what we're here to do. Why don't you get us started with your first thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of give an initial thoughts on Pax Pamir 2nd edition. So this is the new one put out by Whirligig Games, which is kind of a little ad hoc company composed of Cole Worley and his brother Drew. Their goal is to kind of, release kind of more passion projects, things they want to do, but that may not have the biggest market for, that might not be appropriate to leader games where Cole's working right now. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things he really wanted to do was revisit Pax Pamir because, that came out with Phil Eklund, Sierra Madre Games. He was, because of the restrictions, limitations, and making it like PAX, there was some, things he was happy about, but things he wasn't. And they decided that would be a good sort of first look back at things he had done. Now, with the 2nd edition, my initial thought on it, first of all, I think, even though it's not a Sierra Madre game, I would put it in the PAX line of games, PAX Porfiriana, PAX Renaissance, Emancipation, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. The goal, I think, if I remember right, Cole had was to make a PAX game that was very easy to access, that was fairly user-friendly, mm-hmm. that a lot of people could get in. And he attempted
initially or in the 2nd edition?
Both. He wanted it to be accessible, but I think I've heard him on an interview say, which I kind of did and kind of didn't. But mm-hmm. I would say the 2nd edition is very much the most accessible PAX game.
Okay, cool.
I would even comparative to PAX Porfiriana. I think you can teach Pax Pamir 2nd edition fairly quickly. I think when I looked at the rule book, if you take out kind of the historical notes and component descriptions, you're talking less than 15 pages of rules with lots of diagrams. Mm-hmm. So it's a lot more rules compared to the others. However, there is still that opacity to it. There's still a lot of okay, we understand all these simple rules. How do I win? Okay, there's these cards. That's
4 different ways to win, right?
Actually, they got it down pretty slimmed on this one. So in the 1st edition, you had to do all this matching up of the right pieces to the right political thing that was on at the time. Mm-hmm. In this one, there's just three sort of win condition kind of things. So if someone ends up 4 points ahead of somebody after what they call a dominance check, which was kind of your topples, all that kind of thing. If at the end of that any one player is 4 points ahead, game over, they win. If they are not, what you do then is you check to see if a check is successful or not. It's successful basically if one of the regimes, either the Afghans, the British, or the Russians, have the most pieces out and 4 more than any other one. So they have 4 more of their blocks out than both the other ones. Then a check is successful. Then you look at who is allied with that faction. If you're not allied with that faction, you don't get any points. You're sorry. So if you're allied with that faction, whoever has the most influence will get the most points. Whoever gets the second most influence will get so much, so on and so on. And so that's kind of one way to get points. And this one's more about points rather than sort of that sudden death. Like, I won because of the topple. You get points.
Yeah, points are pretty intuitive.
Right. And so the other thing you look at is if one of the regimes is not dominant, it's called an unsuccessful check. Then instead of looking at all the blocks representing the countries, you look at the cylinders you have, which represent your tribes or spies. So then anybody can get points, not just whether you're aligned with whatever. And so whoever has the most cylinders out gets 3 points. Whoever has the second most gets 1 point. Everybody else, butt kiss. And then it can be even more brutal than that, though, because they do the lovely thing. If there's ties, you add them up and divide by 2 kind of thing. So this can get nasty because say there's a tie for first place. Okay, well, then you add first and second together. And each of you get 2 points, right? Now, let's say instead there's a tie for second and third place. Well, that's only 1 point. 1 divided by 2 is half a point, and it rounds down. So
nothing.
None of you get anything, and first place gets 3 points. And then what they do is you do your 4 dominance checks. Whoever has the most points in the end of the game wins. The one other thing that can be funny, though, is if a dominance check is sitting in the market and people are kind of, jockeying for position, if another dominance check comes out into the market at the same time as another one there, it's an instantaneous dominance check. And both of them get discarded. So now there's 1 less check in the game. And that actually happened in my first game of it. It's like, okay, we're ready. We're just, oh, crap. Oh, well, no, wait, this is good for me. I get the 3 points. All right.
Nice.
But yeah, so anyway, I don't want to go into all the teaching of it. It plays similar to most PAX games. But I would say that the gist of it being accessible, it is very accessible. The rules kind of make sense once you start playing. I think this is a game that would benefit from like I'm going to tell you a couple basic things, and then we're just going to play the game, and I'm going to explain as we go, because it makes a whole lot more sense as you're doing things. The other thing I wanted to do with this review was kind of talk about the good and the bad I can talk about. First of all, this is one of the most beautiful board games I have ever seen.
Is there different artwork on it, or is it the same art?
There's a little bit of different art. The cards are a little bit bigger and easier to read.
Okay, cool. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Andy. What makes it so beautiful?
Well, yeah, the cards, they're a little bit bigger. The text is easier to read. The icons make a little more sense. All that's really good. They have now for like the roads and the armies in the old edition, they just used wooden cylinders, right? Now they have these resin blocks for the roads in the army, and they're like, carved patterns on all of them. So if you had colorblind issues, maybe these would work for you on that. So those are beautiful. To distinguish who rules an area, you have these like wooden discs that are like carved for each region. And And then some people are taking it a step further, like they're staining their wooden discs and like putting washes on them and make them look really pretty, which I'll probably do at some point just because I'll get bored and want to do a project of some kind. But it gets just crazy because like when I first opened the box, right? So the box is like this purple color with like all this intricate stuff. It's really cool. When you open it up, like the inside of the lid of the box is a painting. Like it's not just a white box, like it's a like Afghan painting there from that time period. The insert is very functionable. If you paid for the upgraded metal coins, which I did, because they weren't that much on top of it anyway, like they're very intricate. They're very nice. They got enough heft to them to be neat, but they're not quite as, you know, basic as so many other metal coins. Like they look like a coin that would have been used in that. You get a cloth map. It comes with like that, which is like designed to look like a map would have, you know, about that time period too. If you hate cloth maps, you can forego using the market board and flip it over, and they got a board there if you really just want to go with the board. So yeah, it's just really pretty, and then everything is tracked really easily, so you know who's in what position to do what and where, and all that kind of stuff. It allows for negotiation, which is kind of nice. However, you can't like trade any resources unless you use a game mechanism to do it. So you could be like, hey, look, if I pay you like 2 money, will you not attack me here? And you're like, okay, but I can't actually give you the 2 money. Okay, but if I try to play a card in your region, I have to pay you for the privilege because you own the region. So I'm just going to waste my action to play a card and give you some money. So you can do that, but you can also, if somebody like has to pay you, you can waive that bribe. So you can be like, you know, you do owe me $3, but we're all friends here, right? Like, you know, so there's that aspect. However, it is worth noting that all negotiations are non-binding.
Of course.
So like, yeah, you could shaft someone and it might have happened a time or two. So there's that aspect to it. But the main thing I do want to kind of bring up here is because some people have been asking, and honestly, I was kind of on this bandwagon for a while of I have the first edition. Do I really need the second edition? Right. Or if I'm going to get the second edition, should I keep my first edition? We'll put it this way. I got the second edition. I have the first edition and I have the expansion for the first edition. I fully intend to keep all of them.
Wow. Why so does the second edition come with the expansion in it?
It's just it's a redone game.
So it's okay. Yeah. Cause I was gonna say, like, what you've described so far, Andy, to be honest, like it almost seems like it's like a bit of a more accessible, but changed in the process to be accessible. So like that huge tension that comes from Pax Prime, this amount, like the fact that the game is so, you know, like I think volatile. You like that? What's the word? Like it's opaque and it's unstable. Also unstable. Yeah. And what your description made it sound like it's much more stabilized. It's much more like going to be friendly towards people trying to learn what they're doing and don't have their bearings yet. So
yeah, Pax Pamir first edition, especially with the expansion, is actually going to be a heavier game.
Okay.
So it's kind of like second edition was built on the base bones of first edition and then just tweaked enough to make it interesting and accessible. But I can still see a situation where, okay, we're all like Sierra Madre fans here. We all can handle heavy games. Let's bust out first edition with Kyber knives because it does work considerably differently than Pax Pamir second edition does. But you can see the evolution in the games kind of as he goes from the first edition to first edition with expansion to second edition. But no, ignoring being a collector, I think first edition, especially with the expansion and second edition, could totally sit on your shelves and be justified as keeping them. They offer, you know, it's kind of like Age of Steam base game and Age of Steam a new map. They both play very similarly, but they're both their own animal, and I can see reasons for having both. So I have no intention to get rid of my first edition with Kyber knives. I would still play both. There's not one at this point I prefer more, other than if I'm going to teach somebody who's new to PAX games. I think PAX Pamir Second Edition is the way to go. It's just so far for my money the most accessible, while still having a lot of really good tense decisions, enough opacity to be like, what am I going to do here? But we noticed we were starting to get it by the end of the first game. Like, we were starting to plan things by then. So it's not like, say, like PAX Renaissance, where in your 11th game you're starting to plan things. So anyway, my base thoughts is I'll revisit this again with a little more thoughts on mechanisms and stuff after I've had a chance to play it a little more. But I can say for sure that this is a beautiful game. If you like that PAX style game, I would get a hold of it because Cole, from what I understand, Cole has said this is not going to hit general distribution. Once the copies are gone, they're gone. He's not doing this for sales or anything. He's just doing it to get some of these passion projects out. I think there are still copies available on Whirligig Games, so if it's something that sounds interesting to you, I would go jump on that while you still can. Yeah, PAX Pamir Second Edition, I'm really digging it. I'm looking forward to diving into it a little more, and it's pretty awesome. All right.
Sounds cool, Andy. I'm actually I did not back the second edition because, when I think of second editions, I didn't think of what you described. Now, obviously, I should have done more research into it. Chalk that up to me just being busy and there being a lot going on in my life when that stuff was going on. So,
however, it is worth noting you're going to be paying a premium for that.
Yeah,
because first edition was like probably normal Sierra Madre prices, so not counting expansion, $35. Yeah, 60 something for second edition.
Okay,
and it's a big box thing too. It's not
okay. It is like it's blown up to like the size, like the box now matches the size of the game.
Right. Yep.
I'm actually going to be doing a second edition of a game, Andy, and this will be, I think, a pretty stark contrast to what you've just described, because that second edition sounds very groundbreaking. It sounds like something I'd be really interested to play, and it might even, who knows, occupy a separate spot for me like it does for you, or it could even replace what I enjoy about Pax Pamir, though I really do like Pax Pamir a lot. Like, the first edition to me is what turned me entirely onto Sierra Madre games. Like, that game did, it did that for me. So I already really like that game. The second edition that I'm talking about is the Ancient World Second Edition. It's by Ryan Lockett, Red Raven Games. Ryan Lockett does the artwork, does the production, does the game design. It is his show, and the Ancient World is a game that originally came out a few years back, worker placement game, and I did play the original version of the game once or twice. And but it's so far distant in the distant past that I wasn't 100% sure what was new and what was changed. Like, when I played the this most recent game, so I will just kind of review it as though I was playing it for the first time to a certain extent, because, to be honest with you, the changes are slight. Like, I think there's some end game buildings that are always available, and I think that there's a little bit more balance done. Like, you're able to do things at every point. Like I did feel like it was balanced to the point where every single turn I was making an impactful decision. And I do remember the first time I played it, there was occasional times where I'd like dump a turn or two that was just like, well, I'm not going to be able to get to that thing that I need to do. I've got 2 actions to do it, and I need at least 3 or 4. So I'd sometimes end up with like burned actions just because maybe I was poor planning, but I also think that like sometimes the game design would lead to there being occasional sort of clogs in the economy, where no player is capable of fighting this monster, which is what this game's all about. In the Ancient World, you are fighting Titans, and there are 3 different stacks of Titans based on difficulty, and they will come to your town, which I actually don't remember super well that happening in the first game. Like I said, it very well could be there. It's a lot coming out of my memory here. But they will actually come to your town and attack your town, and you have to fight them off every round unless you want to bribe them, which you can actually use ambrosia, the nectar of the gods, to bribe them. Something I do not remember at all being around in the first edition of the game. Is a really nice molded plastic piece, as you would expect. Ryan Lockett. It's like molded plastic that has like a marbled look, kind of like the marbled dice and Near and Far, and it just goes together. It has a sepia-toned, beautiful desert, sweeping sands aesthetic that I absolutely adore. And the ambrosia, like I said, can be used to get these titans to not attack you. And basically what you're going to be doing in the game is fighting titans, either the one attacking you or ones on a publicly available stack, and you do so by paying your armies. And the way that you get and maintain armies and hire new ones is by placing workers. And your workers all have a value 1, 2, or 3. The values are very simple. Basically, if you go to a place that's already occupied, it has to be with a equal or higher numbered worker, unless you want to pay $1. And that's pretty much it about those different numbers. There's not really that much to the worker placement aspect of the game. It's not super exciting. However, ambrosia is now in the second edition laid out on the board in places that are less tasty, less frequently used. And so you'll be slurping up this ambrosia, it really is like the nectar of the gods here. I don't remember it being present at all in the first edition of the game. And this ambrosia is like free extra actions you can do on your turn. And the amount of ambrosia that you need to spend to take an action is kind of inverse to how it's correlated to how like powerful the action is. So I like that aspect of the game, though I didn't find myself specifically gravitating towards ambrosia that much, because it seemed like you had to have at least 2 of them to do anything really impactful. Everything else was just kind of like a stalling. You could stall with one. But anyway, the way that the game functions is you attack a Titan, and then you're going to collect that Titan, and it has colored banners on it. And you want to get, it's like set collection for banners. And that's pretty much the only way that I scored points in this game, was just by doing that. It's almost the most direct. There's a few other supplemental sources of points, but like you can just play that part of the game and not even really worry about any other points in the game. And as a matter of fact, I would say that like that's the game. It's like trying to collect these banners from these Titans. And so it is a very simple game. Like it is just directly like you get armies, you pay armies, you fight Titans, you get banners. And then end of the game, how many points do you have? So overall, my thoughts on the Ancient World are that it is just a little bit too straightforward and simple. It feels kind of like another like medium weight Euro that just doesn't like feel that tense. It's slightly multiplayer solitaire. It's not slightly. It is very much multiplayer solitaire. And as an efficiency puzzle, it lacks a ton of actions. Like the rounds to me felt like, you can get more workers, but why? You just have to feed them and stuff. I feel like it has elements that, like I didn't really approach getting new workers, though I have in the past. When I played in the past, I remember, like trying to get extra workers because that can be really important. But I think it's almost like the game almost feels too, like, I don't know, like it's balanced, it works well, but it's almost like there's not that much different that you're doing than anybody else. And it is for that reason, I think everybody's doing about the same thing. I feel like if I played this multiple times, which I mean, now I was playing it in the second edition after having played the first, I could see myself tiring of it before too many plays. Like, I don't think I would want to play this more than maybe 3 to 5 times. And then I think I'm pretty much good on it. If you really enjoy a game where you're like fighting threats and stuff like that, I to be honest with you, I would rather play Near and Far of Ryan Lockett's library. Like that is by far my favorite. It is, to me, this has some of the same aspects of it. It has like the worker placement, but it's not as snappy. It's a lot slower. And that, for that reason, like the Ancient World, to me, a beautiful production, what you'd expect from Ryan Lockett. If you're looking for like a medium weight Euro that has lower interaction, this is your game right here. I think it could really work for you. But it's not, we'll talk about mechanisms in a minute, and I'll kind of talk about what I'm looking for in games and how that isn't necessarily what the Ancient World looks to deliver. So I think that it does what it sets out to do very well. I think that that's pretty, what Ryan Lockett knew what he wanted to do, and he just made it better in this game. I think that he's improved the Ancient World, but still, at this point, I've kind of moved, at least my tastes have moved beyond something that's I want a little bit more interaction than this. So Andy, stay far away.
That's what I wrote in the chat. I'm like, so this is so not an Andy game.
Yeah, not at all. No, not at all.
Which is fine. Not every game has to be an Andy game. So.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for a lot of people, like when you hear my opinion, I just want you to think, like whether or not it's what you're looking for, because everybody's, what you've got, your internal computer that's choosing your games and listening to any bit of information and filtering it as to what are you going to do with this information? I think that what we're about to talk about in our topic will hopefully help you to find the right lens to view that review, as well as any other reviews that I have recently, and looking into at least the immediate future. I feel like this is where I am at, talking about what mechanisms I'm looking for, what am I interested in and why. So Andy, would you like to take it away, being as you're you suggested the topic, or among other things? So
yeah,
go for it.
Yeah, I guess first of all, kind of like why I threw this out as the topic, and kind of to add to what you were saying earlier. I think sometimes it's fun to go back and look at your thoughts on mechanisms, themes, and other things, and see what you like now compared to what you like then. Has it changed? Has it not? Why might that? Because I think if you look at those early shows, which I may or may not have been on at that time, frankly, I don't remember. I think we did some. I've probably diverged the most.
Potentially, yeah.
Just in weird ways. So, for example, mechanisms I now like that I frankly, for the most part, didn't like in the early days was probably the biggest change is auctions. I love auctions now. And I used to loathe auctions, especially blind bid auctions. That was just oh God, I don't want to. But now those kind of things, I really enjoy. If something, someone's like, oh, this game has an auction. And I'm like, really? This could be it. The only thing I'm still not, I think, a huge fan of is if it's just an auction for turn order.
Really?
Because I think if it's going to matter a lot, I think it's interesting. But I like auctions where there's something to value more, if that makes sense. So
Age of Steams, is essentially a turn order auction, but there's more attached to it. You can't really separate the action that you're drafting from the turn order. Technically, you're drafting turn order, but there's a lot more to it.
Yeah, and I would say for the most part, in Age of Steam, I'm more focused on what special ability I want to get rather than where that puts me in the place.
For sure.
I think the ones I don't like as much would be Scoville and Archipelago, where it's just blind bid for turn order, and then you move on, and it's did we really need an auction for that? Sometimes it seems like there could be a better way of doing it. But if there's an auction and there's something to value and analyze to give you an idea of what those numbers could be.
Well, Great Zimbabwe has an auction for turn order that I quite enjoy.
That's a unique one.
I mean, but it's it gets distributed. What you bid gets distributed, and I think that's that's just one that I would throw out there as an auction for turn order that I'm a fan of, and I think Age of Steam too. But then again, Andy, here I am trying to find out where the bear crap in the woods, which is you saying I don't like auctions for turn order, and so I'm like, let me think about that, because think.
No, that's valid. And I think even blind bid auctions I kind of enjoy now too, because those are Container, which is an awesome game I love. I just like it where there's a system of evaluating where it's not just how much is it worth to you? I don't know. In Container, it's okay, if I win this auction, it's going to be $15 bonus to me. Okay, what is my bid worth? And
it's intense. Just like Modern Art. Modern Art has that same sort of you get money for doing business unless you're stupid about it. There's a certain threshold that you are not actually making money, so you should not do this because you are helping the person auctioning it. Yeah.
For example, the auction element turned me on to an older Euro game that I've got and still have not gotten to the table, and I want to, but Low and Hertz, which eventually became Domain.
That one has an auction in it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because it's basically I want to do it with at least 4, because 4 is like probably the play count for the game. Because in Domain, as far as I remember, and I haven't played Domain, like, there's action cards, you do things. In Low and Hertz, what happens is you turn over an action cards, and there's 3 possibilities on it. And there are 4 players, and nobody can duplicate an action. So it's like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. No, now I'm going to do that. So now, okay, well, how do we decide who's doing this? Okay, well, at first you do a negotiation. I'll give you X money if you just let me do this action, please. And then if you can't, you can't come to terms, okay, now you auction the action. So basically,
that sounds nothing like Domain. I mean, Domain is like a straight Euro, like area control card play.
This one has all of that. But when it comes to the actions, like in a 4-player game, every round someone's getting the shaft.
Oh my goodness! It's like in what is it? Tramways. Tramways has that. Tramways has one of the strangest auctions I've ever seen. Like, just the way that it works is strange. I struggle to wrap my head around it. Like, I've read that auction paragraph over and over and over out of the rules, and you can get the shaft hard in that one because you get those void cards, which are just trash.
Yeah, and that's a really funky auction, and like I never did it enough to get super comfortable with it, but I feel like that one, if someone was really good at that auction, you're just gonna be like, oh, I'm doing great at this auction. Wait, how am I last now? What the hell just happened? It's just an oddball. But yeah, auctions in general, I've come to really enjoy in really enjoying games, and it was not something I liked at the beginning a lot.
I would say that for me, the journey has been like figuring out that I really like auctions that are constrictive. And I would say that just overall, like, I think what I'm looking for in games at this point is one of 2 things, right? There's like a sort of idea of building a feeling of accomplishment in something that I've created, or some sort of a path that I've traveled, where it's essentially like what I've got in this game is like a series of postcards of this trip that I took throughout the game, or a tableau in front of me, or, like a city that I've built, or something, something to sort of like represent the journey that the game took, that I took throughout the game. Like that's one thing that I appreciate at this moment. And then, like souvenirs, I guess you could call them, as a mechanism, that's what I'm looking for from a mechanism. It's like, give me some nuggets to like hang on to.
That's the appeal of, I think, a lot of Euro games is like, a lot of them when they do it.
Not just Euro games, Andy. Like the Great Zimbabwe, when I get like done with that, I look at, there's so many different ways that I can like, it's. But I guess the Great Zimbabwe is the most Euro-y of those. But like, I mean, when you get done with like Food Chain Magnet, you have this entire like, a workforce in front of you, together with a like a empire that you've built.
Yeah. I get that. And that's the thing I think that's appealing, particularly with Euro games, but others, is like a lot of the more modern ones and stuff, like at the end of it, well, okay, let's go with an oldie but a goodie that I love. Agricola. If I was playing Agricola with you and Nate, I was always playing for third. But at least at the end of the game, I could look at my farm and go, look at the farm I built. Like, even if I lost horribly point-wise, you can still look at the awesome farm you built. And a lot of, I think Civ games do that too. It's like, at least in the end, you can look at your Civ, you can see where you started and where you ended up. And I think that's good too. Yeah, because I think you get a feeling of accomplishment out of that makes it a little less about like the competition aspect of the game. It's like, if you're not winning, you can at least kind of be like, okay, well, I'm not winning. I'm going to set, what do I want to do? What's a plan I could do? So like in the early days of Agricola, it would be like, I know I'm not winning. Okay, I'm just going to focus on like making sure all my people are fed and I'm not stressing out about it.
Yeah, like the the ancient world, to look at a positive thing in this aspect, like whenever you hire a new unit, like a new military unit, you actually take your existing unit and flip it upside down, and it's almost like you're sort of adding the experience of your previous units to your new ones. They all have different things. I would have wanted a little more in variation in what they do, and it was a little bit Melba toast in that aspect, but it certainly sought to do that, I think, a little bit. So I'm either looking for that, for that sort of like journey that's laid out in the game, or I want, the analytical, like something where, the type of thought that I'm trying to do is like you mentioned, in Agricola, like it's got both, because I've got this cute little farm, right, that I'm building, and this tableau of cards, occupations, minor improvements, major improvements that I'm building as well. But then also, like, I mean, the amount of choices like is going to be large at the beginning of a round, and then it will fill up, to the point where like the options available go down in ways where the good stuff for you, especially if it's the same as the good stuff for other players, it's just like, you sort of try to take a little, you start a strategy and you start constricting yourself by your earlier choices, and then you have to figure out whether or not to keep with the path that you sort of started the round with, or abandon it and go somewhere else. Like constriction and tension, constricting decisions lead to tension, and especially when you put players in interaction. So I mean, like those are the two things specifically that I'm looking for, and I kind of want to have both of them, if possible. But obviously, every game's a different experience, and some games don't necessarily have either of those. But like that's my preface with. That's what I'm looking for from mechanisms, right? Those are, and so anything I say is just me looking for what, does it do some of that? Does it do some of this? I think generally mechanisms tend to focus more on one or the other. Mm-hmm. You can, of course, have, of course, there's probably examples where some things can do both, or, nothing at all. But, that's what I would say, Andy. So for my first, or did you want to comment here before?
No, I think I agree with that. I think, even though like we sometimes play very different games, I think both of us are still looking for like an experience where there's tension and tightness to it. I think the games, where we still overlap and like to play with each other and other people, and it's not games where it's like, I can do anything. It's bountiful. Yay.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, I was just going to comment on that. So go ahead.
Okay. So let's take this all the way back on this journey back to the very beginning of the show, like, episode number 5 or whatever it was. The one where I felt so proud of myself for telling everybody, what my name for dice are in games? Dice are excuses. Where it's just, but that's all. It's so internal. I didn't realize just how internal that was for me. How for me, I was filtering it through this frustration of always feeling like I played Risk and I was the first one out because I just couldn't roll to save my life. Mm-hmm. And that's, I was always looking for the negative things in dice. And I think that strong reaction, there's been game designers, I think Vlad has said that, he wants people to have strong reactions to his games, right, because it means that there's something special, something unique there. Like when you have a really strong reaction, be it positive or negative, there's something to be said about that in general. Because maybe the opposite, I've been listening recently to what is the opposite of love? The opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is apathy. So mm-hmm. I hated dice so bad to start with, I hated them so bad that I probably lost many friends over the deal. I'm sorry to you. I hope you'll have me back here now that I'm a better person. Anyway, I'm not speaking to dice. I'm speaking to people. But anyway, the thing is now, when I think about, when you mentioned this, I thought, what am I really interested in? You know what? I like games that have action selection. So, I mean, like worker placement, right? Mm-hmm. But worker placement by itself, it's something that just when every worker does the same thing and you're just drafting the actions, it has to be a pretty complex game for that to entertain me by itself. And I would say that there's already many games that are complex at that. So what I really like is when games have something that that switches up your workers. And there's two ways that you could take this. One of them is for workers to have special abilities. And I think that one of the pitfalls of that is potentially your workers with special abilities always get used in the same spot every single time. because it's like, oh, well, I want to go here. This is my worker that always goes here because he's better at this type of stuff. You know, it can almost program your decisions a little too much. But you can, of course, have them have all kinds of different like roles and stuff as well. I think a great example of a game that does that extremely well is Three Kingdoms Redux, where each of your workers is like a totally unique person, which I think is really cool. But I think another way,
in my opinion, to kind of piggyback that is, I think out of all the games I've played that are worker placement that have special abilities, I still think that one's done it best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Mm-hmm. And I mean, there's also ways that you can have those workers. I mean, there's other things you can do outside of this, but I'm just thinking about the workers themselves having something unique about them, and that is by making them dice. I mean, you know, having them be dice and then having either different values of dice be used in different spots for different benefits, or that you use these dice, you know, like as in groups. And I mean, like the games like Trois, like Voyages of Marco Polo. There's Teotihuacan as well. Yeah, but in Teotihuacan, yeah, it is. But I would say that it's not specifically what I'm referring to.
Okay.
Mainly because it kind of is and it isn't. So the reason that I'm saying this is because round to round, I've got this puzzle that I'm making, right? This puzzle that I'm forming, and that changes based on what I've rolled. But in Teotihuacan, it's much like, you know, you're never rolling dice in that game. You're never, you know, you're never sort of, and so the decisions that you're making is still, but it does that. You're right though, Andy. It does it with dice, but it does more of the, like, you know, these are unique workers based on their strength.
Right. But there's no randomness in it. Like they come out and you can puzzle through it with them.
So it's more like the first thing I mentioned, which is when you got different workers that are, you know, differing strengths or differing abilities. So it's like it works for this, but kind of not for the reason that you would think.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's what I would say. Like, I really still like action selection, but I want there to be something about, you know, either the game itself has to be almost too convoluted to be worth it, you know, if it's a straight worker placement game, or you know, the workers have to do something weird. Like, for example, a game that did something different I'd never seen before with worker placement is Architects of the West Kingdom. In Architects of the West Kingdom, you only place like one worker per round, but you have like 20 of these things. And when you place them, like the strength of your action is based on how many you already have in that spot. And so it ends up being like more about these like groups of your workers that you're trying to manage. And then you can actually kidnap other players' workers and sort of hold them hostage and get rewards for them. I mean, it was a weird way of like integrating interaction, and as well as, you know, like action selection in a way I've never seen done before. So I mean, that's just one example, but I'm still hammering out my worker placement games. It's just that I'm looking for, you know, I guess I'm looking more for something that makes those workers behave in a different way, more so than just a game that has a larger board of action selection. So,
yeah, I would agree with that, and I think some of that may be why, like, kind of those standard sort of medium of the road Euros just don't excite me anymore. Because if you're making a game and you're like, it's a worker placement game, you know, my immediate thought is, what have you done different and interesting from Agricola? Because if you haven't done something different and interesting and it's just worker placement, I'd rather frickin' play Agricola. Like, sight unseen, hands down. So if you haven't, you know, done something unique and interesting, it's like, why would I waste time here when I could go back to the thing I know I'm going to love that does worker placement beautifully, or even Kalis or something like that. Like, you've got to do something new to stand out, or it's just, why play this when there's these great games, and I know they're great games, and I know everyone's going to have a good time playing these great games. Why does yours need to be there?
Yeah. And I think the Kalis is a great example. Dominant Species behaves like Kalis in that, you know, like you're placing the workers, but they get activated in a set order based on, you know, where they were placed. So, yeah.
It's a great game. Yeah, that one I still, that's one of the, well, plus you can, like, eat each other, so that's now Dominant
Species, all the claws.
Even if I get a little Euro fatigue, so the Dominant Species is a game, it's like, I'm always happy to play that game.
Oh, that's
It's
a
so much
stabby. Yeah, people that are excited by Euros in general are gonna hear about Dominant Species and go like, "That's not a Euro."
Yeah, that's what they say, and then they play with me, and they're like, "So what do you want to be?" I'm like, "Spiders."
Sure.
The birds were just not as fun. Let's be it. But no, honestly, yeah, I get where you're coming. That if you're going to do some of these older, not older, but tried and true mechanisms like worker placement, you better be able to make that mechanism stand out in some unique way, or it's just not worth it.
Yep.
Let's see. What would be another mechanism I'm really into lately?
I can go while you're thinking, Andy, if you want. I had because I wanted to come up with one that kind of like did the.
Okay, go ahead, and then I'll bring one up.
That's the constrictive aspect, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the worker placement, or having things, that's like the analytical side. So I actually, just wanted to say that like deck building, there's deck building is getting applied in some very creative ways, some really cool stuff. I think happens in deck building. I think that like when you get done, like deck building kind of does both at the same time very well, in that you're creating something that shows your journey, which is your deck, and it gets all done. But then every single round, you're like, what am I going to get from this? And how am I going to use it to the best of my abilities? And I think that, that just in general is, like there's just a classic balance there between the two things I'm looking for most in a game. And you can do it on a simple enough basic level, such as like El Dorado. The quest for El Dorado to me it's the one where it's basically like a gigantic progress bar, because you're just trying to travel from the beginning to the end. You're like racing to get to El Dorado, and it's pared down to where you only draw 4 cards in a round, and most of your cards are just like, there's like 3 different types of currency. One's used to buy cards, one's used to move on, like through most of the board, which is jungle, and then others are used to kind of take shortcuts, which are like these water spaces. But I mean, it's just like that's it. That's all you start with, and then you're adding things that are basically better versions of those, and then occasional special abilities. But like, there's some meatier things that you can add to it in expansions. But it's just like once you get all done, you can look at your deck and see like what did I make here, and I think there's just it's one of those where it's such a it's a really cool thing that I'm still enjoying. And you can blow deck building from that simple El Dorado all the way up to, like Mage Knight, which I've seen other games that do kind of what Mage Knight does in a really cool way as well. Like Dungeon Alliance, I thought was a really cool take on like a party game. Mage Knight, if you control the party as opposed to one character, which I personally thought was a really cool thing. But anyway, I'm still deck building after all these years. I still am, and I'm proud of it.
Yeah, I think I'm still at the same place with it, in that for me, I think I enjoy it more as a supporting mechanism than I do as like the star of the show. Like if you mix it in with the right stuff, like I really enjoy it. Like Mage Knight, for example, I really like how it works there. Or
Tramways is such a funky way of deck building in a game.
Yeah, because it's almost like Time of Crisis. Like it's less draw, it's more like select, but I got to go through the deck. Yeah, I enjoy that aspect of it too. That they do in Time of Crisis. That's more up my alley, because I get to kind of control that a little bit more. But yeah, for example, like, I only ever played it once, but I really kind of enjoyed a play of Trains, which is closer to sort of Dominion style deck building, but you throw in that map and stuff with it. What was the one that I liked? I'm drawing a blank. Core Worlds.
Core Worlds, sure.
I really like Core Worlds.
Like it was like a bigger. I think that what I appreciate about deck building, Andy, is that it can give me a full game experience in such a short amount of time. I think that for you, maybe that short amount of time, it doesn't. It just feels like it's not getting there, because Core Worlds is like a 2-3 hour deck building game.
Yeah, I think it also becomes into an issue of like, if it's pure deck building, it becomes just like an efficiency game, and that's a little less interesting to me.
Yeah, it
And I
doesn't have
think
phases. Like a lot of deck building games don't have phases. They're just like do this as efficiently as you can and keep going until the end. And yeah, I would say that. Yeah, that probably is why you and I might both enjoy deck building, but not always in the same games.
in the same way, right?
Yeah.
And I think I tend to like it where like um, uh, the ability to thin the deck is done in a different, unique way, other than just I need the card that allows me to thin my deck. So, like in Time of Crisis, I can spend points to discard cards. In Core Worlds, I tuck the cards under the planets. I kind of like it where like the thinning the deck is not another card, but there's another way of going about it. Or in Mage Knight, there's no thinning your deck. If you make a bloated monstrosity, you're just gonna have to deal with that piece of junk now.
Yep. All those wounds.
Oh no! Well, not even wounds. Like there was a game of Mage Knight came out where I had the ones where I could play the card to grab any extra action in the action offer or a spell without having to be there, and I built like this bloated monstrosity of a deck that I could never do anything because it's like I could never get enough movement in my hand when I needed to move.
You weren't balancing what you took to.
No, I was just like, I can buy another thing this round. Let's do that.
You sort of like diluted your deck. You had to dilute
to the point of like, it just wouldn't work.
Like you can cast all these amazing spells as long as you're standing on the same spot.
No, except that I would cast one amazing spell when I needed an amazing spell, and then have a hand of movement. But I didn't have what I needed to move, and then I had all these amazing spells. But yeah, those are kind of, I think, the aspects. So yeah, I don't dislike deck building, but I think I'm a little less into sort of the pure deck builders, if that makes sense. Let's see. Okay, so another one that is surprisingly more up my alley than it used to be is negotiation. Oh God, I hated that early on in gaming. I just I didn't want to deal with that. I would say it's changed for the most part in that there needs to be a caveat in that I enjoy it when there's something tangible to negotiate over. So I would say, for example, I'm a little less excited about negotiation as it happens in
Cosmic Encounter.
No, not Cosmic Encounter. I'm drawing the blank now. Classic, World War. Oh God, Trent's favorite game, Diplomacy. Yeah, I'm a little less interested in that, like the mind game negotiation kind of stuff. I like it more in, say, like a John Company, where I can be like, oh, I'll give you X money or a promise cube if we can agree to terms on this, where there's like something to kind of bargain over in the negotiation.
Are a nice touch. Like they add a layer of negotiation that is not commonly found in those negotiation games. Like tangible, I think you said, there's a tangible sort of effect that's sitting there.
Yeah, I like that a whole lot better than sort of like, just the negotiate over the mind games kind of thing. I like negotiation, but when there's definitely like, it's a little bit more of a limited negotiation and it's a tangible thing. I still have not played the game, but I think, for example, I would really enjoy the alliance negotiation aspect in Rising Sun, where it's just kind of a temporary thing, and it's a
very cool.
That kind of thing I would like, but in Diplomacy, and I think, you were the one that I did this to, where it was just like I get to the point where I'm just like, I don't care anymore. Like, I'm just your ally. Tell me where you want my freaking
I
don't care.
You got to understand, Andy, that like your position in Diplomacy was kind of like that a little bit, where like you're kind of more of somebody who's wanting to sort of form alliances and then hopefully you can trust them. Whereas like I was in that position where I was like, holy crap, I'm Germany and I got like enemies at the gates everywhere. I need to go into this with purpose. I need to go into this with like, an idea that this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to like schmooze everybody, but this is who I'm sticking with. So it was weird, and maybe negotiation isn't really my thing, and it's not, but I think I'm with you on this, Andy. I think that like maybe, I feel kind of like the same way about negotiation. Draw a comparison to how you feel about deck building, right? Where I like it when it's there. I like it when it's done in an interesting way. I like it when it matches, the other mechanisms that are there. And I especially want it to have something tangible, but I don't want it to be necessarily the primary focus. But then again,
Right.
In the right environments, I'm sure that a pure negotiation game would be something that I could very much enjoy as well.
Yeah, like I think I don't know if I've ever played Chinatown. I may or may not, but that's another one I need to try. That's kind of in that vein, right? Yeah, but negotiations one I think that I didn't initially care for, mostly because being a little bit riding the line of the autism spectrum, just social cues are just lost on me. So I'm like, basically my tells are easy, and I can't often figure out if somebody else is BSing me or not. So I just get frustrated by it. So yeah, when there's something tangible, like the John Company Promise Cubes money or something, then I do really enjoy negotiation at that point. So negotiation with a caveat, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of negotiation, Murr popped up in the chat. Hey, it's Murr. And I think Murr's favorite game of all time, if it still is what I remember it being before, is Cosmic Encounter, like that sort of classic negotiation where it is like the central vehicle, and it is all about, like the group sort of negotiating together who has the least broken power and the most broken powers. So
yeah, and I still occasionally Cosmic Encounter can still be a good time. The only issue with that game is it's so group dependent. Like you get the right people in there, and I think if Cosmic Encounter is the great, we're all tired. Cosmic Encounter is it's 1 a.m. and I don't want to admit I should just go to bed at this point game.
Yeah, you got to be able to sort of. I think it's tough because I think that it's so easy to get emotional in a negotiation game, right? And it's easy to get emotional in real life too. And what I mean is when somebody does something and you feel wronged, or and I mean when that happens, it threatens to take the rational out of the negotiation game, and you have to for the game to hold up, even a single player doing that kind of threatens it, and so that the group kind of has to sort of absorb that sort of negativity or try to find a way to redirect it. Because, when you get emotional in a negotiation game, that can be exciting, but it can be and entertaining. But it can also be not a positive experience for the person that's feeling those emotions. And especially if they feel like they're being played, like their emotions are being played and they're being used to entertain, because we want to feel like we're taken seriously. So it's tough, and I'm still learning how to do that. But I feel like, I should play Cosmic Encounter now, is play it with a group that really loves it, because I think that, trying to let the chemicals that cause you to go from your front brain to your back brain and stop thinking about every decision, and instead start being like, I'm going to kill Andy now because of that.
Well, and the nice thing too about Cosmic Encounter is while you might, kind of piggyback off that, well, you might want to kill me, the cards may not allow you to actually go kill
That's
me.
true. Yeah. The way that, there's of course other aspects.
It takes a little bit off of that.
Divide people, sure. But
there really is there is that magic circle in a negotiation game that everyone really has to be on board with, or it's not going to go well. There's the famous story I heard of the guy in the diplomacy tournament who got betrayed and literally just broke down bawling in this large room of people because it hit him, and that's what can happen. And
oh gosh, yeah, the emotions, man. So yeah, for sure. It's interesting though, negotiation. I'm glad that you brought it up, because it's certainly one to revisit.
So what about you?
Well, my next one, Andy, is drafting. It's just such a simple thing, but here's where I like draft. Drafting has gone a place that I'm really happy with. Drafting kind of got away from, Seven Wonders drafting, where it's this is cool, everybody gets to go at the same time, but there's not really much strategy. It's very tactical. The strategy comes more from having played the game previously and trying to get, essentially a structure that that you're aware of to come out. You're like, oh, I got this card, I got this card, I got this card. I'm set up for this later card. I think that where drafting is really shining for me now is like the game of Sewell. And what it does is it starts with like a bunch of options, right? But you immediately start committing to something. Mm-hmm. And then you're not just committing to something, but you're also watching all of the what you've committed to just disintegrate before your eyes, like as every other player takes the things that you're like, oh my God, there's no way there's none of those blue tiles left. I took blue because there was the most blue. There's no way. There has to be exactly 3 blue tiles left on the board for me to even finish this row, and there's only 2 rounds left. I'm not going to get this, and then I'm not going to... It's like, I love the way that it's done that. And then same designer, but working with a different co-designer who I don't remember the name, but Heaven and Ale, to me, like, that's also drafting, but it's in a way where you can't go backwards. And you can but you stay in front and you just keep slurping up all those good things. Like, I'm just loving the way that these drafting games are giving me access to a public pool and then forcing doing some pretty easy, fairly intuitive things to make that drafting really impactful. So I think there's been some high impact drafting games recently that have done a really good job. Sagrada as well, a game that did drafting pretty darn well too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's 2 ways I like drafting. One is kind of, you said like Azul. That's fun when when there's like 4 things you really, really want, and you look around and other people want those things too, and you're just like, oh God, but what one do I really just need? Back?
Yeah, you start having to make those tough calls, man. That constriction,
I'm having particular fun with Azul as a family game lately because I think my wife's glaring at me, but I am so training my son William to be a cutthroat little monster. There's been several times now where he basically is like, I can take this and I get 5 points, and then Daddy will take that and he gets 1 point. Or I can take this and I'll get 1 point and Daddy will get like -7. I'm gonna do that.
Yeah. That's right.
And I just
we're gonna make Daddy look up in the rule book about what happens when you filled up your floor with tiles.
Oh God, no! He did that. That little monster did cause me to literally fill up almost the entire floor one game. Like I wasn't paying attention. I'm like, oh, there's 5 reds. Oh crap! I don't know. But nice. I'm trading him like that. It's pretty good. He's fun like that. And but yeah, I like that. And the other way I like drafting is as kind of a round or game setup. Mm-hmm. I like that drafting gives you choice where there may not be choice otherwise. So, like for example, terraforming Mars. Even though it adds to the length of what can, for some people, already be a long game, I would never play that game without drafting. Mm-hmm. I like that choice. I don't know if it's technically drafting, but I do it in 3 Kingdoms too, where it's like, because the rule states you're just supposed to draw a card in a certain spot and you take it, and lemons are awesome. What do you get? And my house rule has always been with that game, always draw 1 more card than it says and discard 1. Like, it just gives you that little element of choice. Like Agricola, unless I was with some inexperienced players, like who just didn't want it. Like if everyone's got a reasonable experience with gaming, I would always start with drafting in Agricola. It's just the better way to go. Even failing that, I would do you draw 10, keep 7. I don't know. I like the drafting adds in the choice. And there's nothing more interesting in drafting than the lovely, I've got 3 good cards here. And then you look at it and you're just like, and it's going to go through 4 people. There's no way in hell these 3 are getting back to me which one
Yeah.
is it. Or the even better fun decision of this card I really, really need. But Joe needs this one even worse. So do I hate draft it and just accept this card sucks for me, but it's going to really knife him? You know, that option is also fun. Like the hate draft is a thing. You know, especially in like your 7 Wonders when someone's obviously playing around with science and you're just like, I can't let him get another symbol or its game for the love of God. This is my wonder card. That's what I'm doing with it. Those kind of things that, I'm a fan of drafting, especially I think is a part of a bigger game just because it always kind of seems to add an element of choice into it and mitigates a little bit of the randomness, which is for me always preferred.
Mm-hmm. I think so too. I think that it can balance, just like when you mentioned auctions earlier. That can be something where and players will sometimes even add those these 2 things to games, like in the case of Agricola or in the case of Terra Mystica, which then got institutionalized as expansion. That these are things that can actually balance what's seen as something that's lacking from a game system that people enjoy a lot, but feel like they want a little more control.
Right, absolutely. Let's see what other mechanisms. I don't know. I'm trying to think of one.
I've done 3, Andy. So you've done 2, and
I gotta come up with one more then. So we'll come up with one more at least.
What about, well, I mean, I don't want to choose your thing. What maybe
what were you
suggesting? Ask you, what did you have for dinner tonight? Maybe like getting your mind off it'll help you think about it. What? I had a cauliflower pizza. I belched earlier during the show, and and I thought, oh my goodness, I need.
You actually hand prepare that crust?
What?
Like
no, I didn't hand prepare. No, I bought like the Oprah. It was on sale.
God, always do that.
Yeah, the Oprah.
Making cauliflower crust is god awful. I've done it once. It was ugh.
I think this is like they probably just grind up a little bit of it.
Oh no, the issue is like you have to get all the freaking water out of it. It's awful.
Yeah, it's very that's what cauliflower is. It's like hardly any calories. It's like all water.
Yeah, it's monstrous. Never gonna do that again. Let's see. A mechanism I think that we'll do one I've liked and I still like. And maybe this isn't a mechanism so much a mechanism, but an aspect. I really like games that reward planning. Like games that have some aspect of I need to do these things in this order for this plan to come off. So like one great example of it and still one of the best planning games is Lignum. Those whole planned work cards when you're just like setting up your sequence to do it right.
And you do like rounds in advance.
Yeah, I really, and that's why I think I tend to favor longer games because there's just that much more planning involved. It's just something I appreciate in games. I like that deep thinking thing. Like, Nate took a picture of me once, there was like, he posted where he's like, Andy obviously is enjoying this game because I'm sitting here like this.
Like you got a headache, yeah.
Yeah, like muttering swear words under my breath.
Yeah. Having impactful abilities that you acquire early and then keep throughout the game, like, I mean, there's some things that really do push towards like what you're talking about, like you're planning for big turns. I think that like, to go back to a game that has dice as workers that I didn't really bring up, but Twa, maybe I mentioned it, but like Twa, you're like, I've seen it happen before, especially the expansion where like, you see somebody first round hire a worker to do a certain thing, second round hire a worker to do another thing. So they've like sort of, are making this like they're sort of like spitballing, like, or not spitballing, but like just making something that just keeps swelling and swelling and swelling, and then you see like in the last turn we're just kaboom, like I just scored 36 points, and I mean like that can happen, but it takes a lot of that planning to do. So when games have the potential for that, it can be really, really cool.
Yeah, well, and the fun aspect is because like I talk about these like deep planning games on the podcast so much is like so many people I meet assume I'm good at them. when in reality, like I epitomize this meme, our lovely cardboard cohorts shared, a few months ago, where it's like, how people think I play video games. And it's got like the picture of Sherlock and the Mind Palace going through equations. And it's like how I actually play planning games. And it's like the Joker with going, do I look like a man with a plan?
Yeah.
It's like, I like playing heavy games. I don't win a lot of heavy games.
It's part of the allure in them, right? When you feel like that's something you always keep on like improving. It's the carrot in your face.
And I do like planning games where also you can go back and look at where the plan went wrong. It's not like, oh, a random card draw destroyed my plan. Like, I can go, I could go into a lot of 18xx games and look at where everything turned bad and go, yep, I shouldn't have bought that damn train. That was the move.
I would say 18xx games really do a great job of that planning. I mean, in every single aspect. That's what they're all about, Andy. I mean, it is like, because you start the game with a private, and that private almost always has like some sort of a special ability of some sort, either an income or like an income that's associated with a different special ability that then changes what you're going to do. Then every bit of track that gets laid on the board is not just you planning, it's everybody else looking at what you're doing and being like, I'll kick that into my plan. So it is very much exactly what you just described.
Well, exactly. Like, I always tell people, I'm like, one of my most amusing moments in 18xx was in 18OE when I looked at, Nate was playing with us and I looked over and I'm like, the sad part is it's taken me 16 hours to realize I lost this game in the first 30 minutes.
The way that you say that and you're happy about it, I think that just really shows. Yeah, saying that, I would have this like edge in my voice, right? Like I do still love planning, Andy, but like the way that you have that view towards it, I think that's an example that even in the most, the most desolate, desperate situation where, like you've been playing against the odds for so long and yet you are still struggling, still fighting, and your takeaway is positive. That is something special.
Well, it's the same with like the knees and elbows aspect. We had a guy in our group was like, it's like, I love playing these kind of games with you because you will happily slide the knife between the ribs with a smile on your face and a chuckle, but you'll do the same thing when I slip the knife between your ribs. You'll just be like, you'll laugh maniacally and be like, bold move. Good job. That kind of thing. But that's something I think in games that like I have never gotten tired of is those deep plans. Like, that's one of the, like I jumped from Catan to Mage Knight, and that's been a solid game for me for years. Like I love that planning in that game. Or, Terra Mystica was probably the first big Euro game where I really got to see that planning round to round. And, do I hold these resources for the future? Do I use them now? And yeah, I was just hooked from that point on. Like I just love that deep planning. There's a lot of games I like with that. And yeah, it's probably why I like 18xx so much, because you're right. They do like exemplify that aspect of gaming.
Well, Andy, this is a great chat. I mean, it's good to come back and revisit these sorts of things because we're on a journey, right? I mean, to a certain extent, this podcast is our deck that we've been building, unless you're allergic to that, in which case, it is our tableau that we've been building, or it's
as long as I can put the card on the draw pile, I'm fine with the
or as long as you get your card right away. Fine, Andy, you can have your card right away. We have a house rule where whenever we play deck building games, we always let you get your card that you just bought right away because Andy makes it. Anyway, and to just continue that analogy from before, it could be, this podcast is the route that we're all building together. And it's of course just been going in a circle the whole time, but we just keep on adding track on top of it and on top of it and on top of it.
Yeah. The route planning where the person who actually knows what they're doing looks over and go, what the crap are you
one day we're gonna like be like, who's that off in the distance? And it's gonna be Norm up all the way up in Western Canada. So it'll be like, how do we get here? So let's go ahead and hype some games here, Andy. Let's get started with you've got you're going back to both of your games coming out from kind of a similar origin, your review and your hype. So go for it.
Oh, Origin. That's a good one. Good transition on. Was that done purposefully or was that an accident?
It kind of was purposely, but I didn't. I think I used the word origin because I'd seen it, so it was like incidental. But yeah, it's just not very creative, and I saw the word origin, so I used it. Actually, that's a good transition. You're right, dude. And then I'm doubting myself, which is just anyway. What is the origin of your hype today, Andy?
So I'm gonna hype BIOS.
So unoriginal. It's just not original.
No. Anyway, I'm gonna hype BIOS Origins. So this is in the lovely Sierra Madre kind of science line that's going on right now. So we started with BIOS Genesis. We are now getting, we've had BIOS Megafauna 2, second edition, and now it's going into BIOS Origins. So BIOS Origins will be the re-implementation of BIOS Origins, which was the re-implementation of Origins, How We Became Human, I think it was, or something like that. The main reason I'm hyping this game is A, I always love the Sierra Madre science line, and B, they actually had a playable prototype at Origins, so I got to see like pictures of what this thing's gonna look like, and like my brain just exploded. I'm just like, so basically, if you think about the upgrade,
melted and exploded at the same time.
Well, we'll put it this way: if you think about like BIOS Genesis to BIOS Megafauna Second Edition, right? The order of magnitude and complexity in that and size of the game, that's what it's going to be like going from BIOS Megafauna to BIOS Origins. Like, there's no way that's coming in a Pax Porphyriana style box. That's got to be a full box. It's insane. And I looked at him like I really like a Sierra Madre game where I look at it, I'm like, I have no clue in hell what I'm looking at right now. Like, I have no idea how that board even functions, which makes me just intrigued as all get out. Whereas like a lot of boards you look at and you're like, oh yeah, it's got a track. I go around the track. I do. Yeah. It's the same thing that like hooked me on High Frontier. When I just looked at them, I'm like, I don't know what that is, but I want to be a part of it. So, and honestly, this is a game. I'm hoping I'm not overhyping it for myself because I've been looking forward to this game literally for years. When they first announced that they were redoing the BIOS line, I was hoping that they would redo Origins, and I've been thinking about it and wanting it just because, I think the first Sierra Madre game I ever got was BIOS Megafauna.
And I remember you being really excited about that one.
Right. Yeah. Like, and I still got that when it hadn't like quadrupled in price yet, like Sierra Madre does. And then I started reading into it, and I saw this game called Origins, How We Became Human, which is, the next step from like, how do we go from these non-culture primate things to having a civilization? And I'm just like, I really wanted to play the game, just like you couldn't find copies for less than $250 at that time, anywhere. And so this is a game I've been, like I said, literally looking forward to for years. Now I know it's not going to be the same as Origins, How We Became Human. I don't care. It's built on those bones. I want to play it. I'm looking forward to it. Even though and it's still making me think like, it'll probably end up causing me to get in on the Kickstarter for High Frontier 4, just because, like, eventually what this is supposed to be. So if you haven't played them, like, it's a progression of games, right? So BIOS Genesis, you start out being like chemicals trying to just make a creature. Then you can literally take your game state and put that into BIOS Megafauna and try to like pull it through that. And now you can be like, okay, so I managed to survive as this animal in BIOS Megafauna. I could take those pieces and put it into Origins and go, how do these become a humanoid society with culture and stuff like that? And supposedly, because this is insane, you're supposed to be able to take your win condition from BIOS Origins and put it into High Frontier 4th edition. So literally, I've heard of someone's planning a tournament I don't know what convention where they literally are going to just start at the convention and they're going to play a tournament games of Bios Genesis, and the winners of that go into Bios Megafauna, the winners of that go into. And so you start the convention with Bios Genesis, and like whoever survives ends up in High Frontier World. And I don't know.
They're going to try to connect them. Holy crap.
Yep, it's insane. And so this is one I've just been particularly looking forward to for years. And, you know, having seen the pictures of it now, what it's really going to do and look like, I'm just frothing at the mouth a bit. And I really want it. And it's not going to be too many more months. So, yeah, Bios Origins.
Cool. Yeah, I'd be excited to see, Andy, based on kind of what you said there. You know, but at the same time, like I think there's a couple other on my list that I might want to get to before this one. This sounds like this is more of that, like, you know, for the connoisseur of these styles of games. And I think
this is definitely this is an order of magnitude complexity above just that Bios Megafauna one. So it'll be sweet.
Cool. So I'll go ahead and move my hype into a game that I think is very aptly named Endeavor Age of Expansion, which is an expansion for the game Endeavor. And, you know what, there's two things I'd like to mention here. First of all, you know, Endeavor, the Age of Sail, was a Kickstarter game where like they added just so much extra stuff throughout the Kickstarter campaign that it sort of formed a community. Now with Age of Expansion, it is not approaching Kickstarter in the same way. You know, like Kickstarter is a way to build a community around a game that's not released yet, right? It's like that sort of a cult, literally a culture forms around this unreleased product. And once that culture is already formed, now companies don't have to do that same, you know, because that's a lot of work. What's happening with Age of Expansion is more like I'm seeing sensibilities towards gamers like me that are like, I don't want more boxes. Like, I don't want more, like if I'm going to get an expansion to a game, I want to be able to put it in the game. And I'm thinking, well, Endeavor Age of Sail is a very full box as it is. Like, it doesn't have much space in it. So here's the thing, Andy. Endeavor comes with all these buildings, right? There's like buildings, tons of them. Like there's like probably 50 total, I think somewhere around there, 48 of them. And what they're doing is they're making a second set of buildings. So it's essentially like you have the expansion buildings and the base game buildings. But one, if I recall correctly, one of the features of it is that they're going to actually print the base game buildings on one side, and then you flip them over, and there's the expansion buildings there. Which means that, like, you know, it's going to essentially add an expansion without adding any stuff, you know, that doesn't fit in my box. So it's like, but then I thought, you know, well, I'm not getting any more content. But like, think about it. You know, you are getting the intellectual property, right? It's like you're downloading the music or downloading the file. So you're getting this better product. You're getting this product that took a long time to develop and balance. And if you look at the feedback on the page, you know, like it's to me, it's a little bit. I guess I swell with pride, or not pride, but, you know, like I feel like the gaming in general is heading in a direction that I respect when I read something like the comments on their page. Where is it here? Okay, this is the Age of Expansion feedback. The Europe cards are a big improvement, making Europe a far more dynamic theater. That is a well-worded phrase, but really what it tells me is that, like, they're focused in on, like, making sure that all these pieces that were in the base game are, like, you know, working to their highest potential. There are comments about basically the way that these mechanisms work for the people that are playing it. And to me, that's, you know, that's confidence inspiring. That's like, you know, trying to get you to like focus on what elements of the gameplay you like when you make your comment, not just say, I love it, big recommendation for me, woohoo. You know, like actually like get into the nuts and the bolts. And maybe that's more common to see in an expansion, but I'm happy to see that. So, you know, like at first I was like, oh, they're just going to reprint like these double-sided things and I'm not going to really have more stuff. What? You know, which like that's my dumb voice for myself. That's how I speak when I'm saying when I'm thinking a dumb thought, because like, no, like I want to have a product that does more with less. And that's what Age of Expansion seeks to offer. So I'm not even getting to play Endeavor Age of Sail with all those really, really cool exploits like I wished. But I do think that this would mix well with that already. So they're not really expanding too much, but rather just adding more things that can then be used with the crap ton of stuff they already gave you.
Yeah.
I'm excited for that.
No, and I think I fall in that category these days too. Like, more stuff does not equal better game. And I think, you know, there's a lot of people that feel like that. I'm getting to the point now where like I'll browse a Kickstarter, and when they're like, here's the base game and it looks really good. Oh, but if you pay double money, you get 3 expansions. And I'm just like, I don't want those, right? Like, why are you putting those out with the base game? It's just, I don't know. I kind of agree with you. More stuff doesn't always equal a better game. And I think paring it down is not so bad. Like, what was it? I saw the Shut Up and Sit Down review of, what was it? The Batman one.
I have that game, Batman Gotham City. Yeah, and I haven't played it yet.
And if you have like all the stuff for it, you're just like, I need a suitcase to bring my one game to game night.
It is, yeah. The last game from that company that I got, Mythic Battles Pantheon, was like that too. And I needed stuff in all of them, right? Because I wanted to be able to draft armies and cool stuff.
Yeah, and so, but yeah, I mean, you're preaching to the choir. This, like, how many things, do I get that's not, I wouldn't say I'm the epitome of more stuff kind of gamer. So yeah, I would agree with you there, and I think that's the way to go too. And just because also I think that the one thing that drives me nuts, I don't know how I'm going to reconcile this, because I love Root, and I know when that next expansion comes in, there's no way in hell it's all fitting in the base box anymore.
That's true. Yeah, it already kind of was like that. Like my expansion barely fit in there, and you had to like chuck those card holders.
Yeah, like it's just not going to happen, and then I'm going to have to bring 2 boxes, and a certain part of me is going to be slightly annoyed at that.
Yeah,
I'm still going to get it because I freaking love Root.
Nice. Well, I'm with you there, Andy, but I probably will just hope that you get it, and so I can play your copy, because like I have Root, and I don't get to play it enough to even really have explored the expansion stuff. So like I'm just, but that's the thing, is that like I've got you to buy it.
Yeah, I need to start bringing that. It's Root is like Kemet. It's one of the few games you can bring, I think, that most people that are not into aggressive games still want to play it.
Mm-hmm.
Like Root for the longest one was like the one game that like everybody could get on board with, except like one person. But but yeah, like
it's you. Andy's talking about you, and you're listening.
Oh, that's right. That's fine. I know he doesn't like it. I don't force him to do it. What was hilarious?
Oh no, I didn't realize you were actually talking about a human being. I thought.
No. What was funny though is when he offered to help me get Pendragon to the table and play that, and he didn't know what it was about. I told him, I'm like, Josh, you hate Root. You should not be playing a coin game. You should definitely not be playing a 6-hour coin game.
Well, yeah, that's true. Like a 6-hour, yeah. I guess there's warnings. There's warnings, but you never know. You never know what somebody's gonna like, right?
Yeah. But anyway, that's all I had.
All right. Well, that's all I got too. Thanks for welcoming me back here, Andy. Thank you for picking up the torch while I've been gone. I'm not saying that I'm going to be able to carry it and run with it for a long time. I've got a couple more trips planned before too long, and I'm glad to see you cutting your teeth here with getting the show together and making things happen. I just really appreciate your work when I've been gone, and this was a lot of fun tonight. So.
Yeah, before we leave, I think one thing to announce is I think next week we're not going to do an episode because I'm gone, Trent's gone, and TC's gone. So unless you want to throw out some all solo stuff, like I
might throw out a few unsolicited reviews. You
unsolicited never know. Reviews.
Maybe I'll even do it at the regular time. But yeah, so our community knows. Yeah, don't.
Yeah, so stay tuned for Joe's unsolicited review on Arizona.
I've actually got a couple of unsolicited reviews to sort of the unsolicited reviews have a dual purpose, right? They are not just to actually review stuff. I mean, I do sometimes review stuff, but it's kind of my way of journaling what's going on with my life. And so, yeah, there will be unsolicited reviews on this episode unless I held off on them, knowing that I'm going to need some if I want to do an episode next week. But so maybe I won't put any on this one, but. Yeah, I've got a couple of fun ones I think to come. So
yeah,
yeah. All right. Well, that's all for this episode of The Good, the More, the Ugly. Thanks so much for listening. Thank you especially to those of you that joined us here in the chat. It was a wonderful experience getting your guys' input, and just wanted to wish everyone a great week of gaming, and catch us here next week on The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly.